Today we celebrate the feast day of Saint Padre Pio, one of the great modern saints of our time, just canonized in 2002 by Pope St. John Paul the Great, and who lived in the 20th century. He was an amazing man, an Italian Capuchin Franciscan friar who for over 50 years bore the visible stigmata, the wounds of Jesus in his body as a priest, which is quite rare. There's been quite a few stigmatics in the history of the church, but very few who were priests. And Padre Pio received these stigmata already as a young priest in 1918. And almost exactly 50 years later, just a few days after the 21st or the 18th of September, he died in 1968. So 50 years, almost to the day, he bore the wounds of Jesus. But he's a saint not just because he bore the wounds of Christ, but because he was called by God and gifted with very extraordinary graces, I believe, to be a sign to our very critical, agnostic, materialistic age, to the reality of spiritual truth and spiritual realities of the supernatural. And Padre Pio manifested the supernatural not only through the visible stigmata, but also through various gifts that he had. He had the ability to read souls and was a great confessor. In confession, would often remind people of sins that they had forgotten to confess. And he also had this sounds almost incredible, this gift of what's known as bilocation, where he could be in two places at the same time. It almost sounds unbelievable, but it was testified to over and over again. Countless witnesses, people who sometimes were sick in hospital beds, experienced Padre Pio coming to them. This is during his lifetime, and while he was known to be back in his hometown in Italy. So this is again an extraordinary supernatural gift that he was given. He also had, or the Lord used him for tremendous healing and other miracles in people's lives. So much so that in this very day and age right now, he is by far one of the most popular saints in the church, and in Italy he is by far the most popular saint at this time, and Italy has produced a lot of holy men and women over the years. But he had a great love for the passion of Jesus, and he willingly accepted the stigmata, which weren't just, they were not just visible wounds. He felt very much the pain of Christ's suffering and Christ's cross, and again lived in an era where much sin was being promulgated. We think of the First World War, the Second World War, the great spread of communism throughout the world, the spread of atheism and materialism, and just the falling away of the faith, which was already begun in the 20th century and only accelerated after his death. So I believe he lived as a man to testify to the reality of the supernatural, the reality of God. He was a very humble man. He wasn't a brilliant scholar, but he was extremely prayerful. He had a great love, childlike love for his guardian angels, and promoted the devotion to the guardian angels. And he also had tremendous love for our Blessed Mother Mary. And he would pray countless rosaries every day, almost continually, the prayer of the rosary when he was free to do so. And again, like Jesus himself, he was misunderstood. He was maligned. He was persecuted. Even the church herself, for several years, banned him from celebrating Mass publicly or hearing confessions. Again, a tremendous mystery how someone who was so holy could be so persecuted, and yet think of our Lord Jesus himself. So he truly was a disciple of Christ, a lover of the cross, and I think a tremendous witness to all of us to be willing to accept suffering in reparation for the sins of the world, and to be willing to love the cross, not just bear it, reluctantly, but to accept the cross in our lives, whatever way it comes. Not to go looking for it. We don't have to look for it. But when it comes into our lives, to be willing to embrace it and to realize that in doing so, we can obtain tremendous grace for ourselves. And in offering that suffering, we can obtain tremendous grace for others as well. So this day, let us truly honor St. Pio of Pietrelcina and pray to him that we too would grow in greater holiness and greater fidelity to Jesus Christ our Lord and to his holy cross.